Denis Popovych, military analyst, is joining the broadcast of Ukraine Today. Hello, Denis. We're glad to see you.
Good evening. Likewise.
What do you think of the assessment by former Commander-in-Chief of Ukraine, Valery Zaluzhnyi, that the war could last until 2034?
I think that the war is limited by its physical meaning, that it will not survive until the 34th year.
Yeah. Why?
Well, I already said that he's already over 70, yes. That is purely for natural reasons. I really hope that it is not measured. Here you go. And why is it limited by Putin's physical existence? I think that we can see that this war is entirely Putin's war. He has provided it with ideological justification. He, in fact, now exists for its sake. Yes, that is, if he stops this war, it would then create a threat to his physical existence, or at the very least, his political existence. That is precisely why he continues. That is why now, unfortunately, until he ceases to be the president of the Russian Federation, unfortunately, it will be very difficult to find any room for compromise. Either he will die, or he will be eliminated, or somehow removed from his position. Then various scenarios arise that would allow for an effective negotiation process.
So in that case, if Putin remains in power, this could drag on even longer. Not just until 2034, right? If the connection is really that strong with him.
Well, he'll be 73 now, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes.
In 2034, he would be, what, maybe 82. I don't think he'll be able to rule the country for that long. If he even lives to that age at all.
Yeah, I really hope so. All right, Denis, let's talk about this. We're striking the south of Russia. Sochi and Adler are on fire. To be specific, oil depots are burning, which serve as hubs for refueling Russian military equipment. Please tell us, how important is it for the Ukrainian armed forces to further expand the geography of their strikes? And what do you think about the targets that were hit last night? How do you assess the effectiveness of these strikes?
The geography of the strikes essentially expands the list of targets that will fall within the range of our strike capability. That's the first thing. Secondly, we are obviously coming back Towel. There was no confirmation that these were actually our drones. But let's put it this way. The good drones have once again started striking oil depots and oil refining facilities. In other words, strikes are being carried out on what is the main source of income for the Russian Federation through oil refining. From the transportation of gas, oil, and petroleum products, the Russian Federation puts money into its budget, and the budget is what funds everything. Right now, not everything is going well in the Russian Federation's economy. That's why strikes on such facilities hit the budget and the capabilities of the Russian Federation. So this is very important. It's very important to strike oil depots and oil refineries. It's as important as striking military industrial facilities.
All right. Let's also talk about the fact that after strikes on military targets, Russia strikes civilian ones. For example, Odesa, Kharkiv, Privosty legendary market was on fire after Russian shelling. They hit the center of Kharkiv with glide bombs. 33 people were injured. Please tell us, what is the situation with air defense in these regions? Or will this continue systematically until we receive American Patriots from allied countries?
Unfortunately, regarding the city of Kharkiv, the devastating strike was carried out with a powerful glide bomb, a weapon with an impressive range of up to 100 kilometers. So, if the plane struck from positions more than 100 kilometers away, I think we currently have a very poor situation. With air defense systems of such range, they are present only in very limited numbers, if at all. That's why a Patriot system would be extremely necessary here. And specifically, a Patriot with missiles capable of reaching distances of more than 100 kilometers. Yes, there is such a system. A diverse arsenal is also needed for these systems. That's the first thing. With such means of attack, it will be very difficult to deal with them at all. And here, the only way is to strike the aircraft at their bases. Again, this brings us back to strikes on the territory of the Russian Federation, whether it's with drones or with other means of attack like our missiles and so on. But in this case, for now, this is still the only option for how such strikes can be prevented. As for the Odesa market, that's already become the norm here. Here in Odesa, there is a particular specificity since the strikes are launched from the sea. And over the sea, the Shaheds concentrate before carrying out such attacks. Here, in fact, the issue of using light aircraft would be very relevant. From Odesa's perspective, this is especially important. In general, this issue is quite pressing when it comes to Odesa.
All right, let's talk about something else now. Russia has in fact begun very serious exercises in the Baltic Sea. It's all called the July Storm. The Pacific Ocean is also involved as a participating region along with the Arctic Ocean, the Baltic and the Caspian Seas, according to Reuters. 150 ships, 120 aircraft, 10 coastal missile systems, nearly 1,000 units of military and special equipment, and 15,000 troops. Could you please tell us whom they are trying to intimidate with these exercises or what they are hoping to learn?
Well,
every voice matters. Join our community, support independent journalism and help us bring you the truth from Ukraine. Become a member of Ukraine Today. Join us now.
It's important to understand that exercises like these are usually planned events and preparations for them were made in advance. In other words, it doesn't mean that they just came up with the idea for these exercises in June and started conducting them in July. After all, they had been preparing for them ahead of time. And this is a scheduled event which is indeed intended both to learn something and to demonstrate something to certain parties. What exactly? If we're talking about the Baltic Sea, we can see what's happening there right now. The Baltic serves as a base for the shadow fleet of the Russian Federation. Currently, our partners, the countries of the Baltic region, are taking measures to slow down this fleet. Yes, that is, to detain tankers, and accordingly these vessels, the Russian Federation will try to respond to this. In addition, this is also a place where the Russian Federation carries out various hybrid operations such as jamming GPS signals and disrupting internet cables that go to the Nordic countries and the Baltic states. So now the Russian Federation is trying to demonstrate that it is the master of the Baltic Sea, that tankers should not be detained, that nothing should hinder the Russian Federation's dominance in the Baltic, and these exercises are aimed precisely at that. In the Pacific Ocean, this is a signal to those allies, primarily North Korea and China, that Russia is present there and can be relied upon. At the same time, it is also a signal to South Korea and Japan that the Russian Federation is present there as well and can pose a serious threat. As far as I've heard, these exercises are also taking place in the Arctic, but the Arctic is generally an arena of confrontation between the US and the Russian Federation. So Russia is also demonstrating that it is a serious player in this region as well.
You know, I'd also like to ask you for a comment on another quote from Valery Zaluzhnyi. That one caught my attention too. When he was asked about a peacekeeping contingent that could help end the war in Ukraine, he said, what kind of contingent are we talking about? A contingent that can shoot down 500 drones over Kyiv, or a contingent that will come here in nice red pants? So what's the point of it? Well, there's probably no point at all. Could you please tell us, how do you assess the possibility of foreign military forces, I'm referring to our ally, actually taking part in the defense or in so-called security provision on some territory of Ukraine? Is there any point in this at all, and could it be one of the tools to end the war?
Look, right now, well, for the past couple of months, there's been a lot of talk about this. Let's deploy some forces on the territory of Ukraine, declare our political presence there, help Ukraine free up reserves that it is holding in certain areas, and transfer them to the active parts of the front, and so on. There could be some limited sense in this. So, for example, let's say France sends its troops here, stations them in southern Ukraine, somewhere in the Transnistria region, and from the Transnistria area, we withdraw some of our units and redeploy them, for instance, to a certain unclear section of the front, for example. Yes, let's model such a situation. And that's basically it, really. In order for this to have any effect on the conduct of the war and to actually help us turn the situation to our advantage, European countries would have to deploy a very substantial military contingent here. But we're talking about numbers like 50 or 100,000 people, right, with air defense systems, artillery, aviation support, and so on. But even when it came to deploying some limited forces, say in the amount of 20 or 25,000 people, our European partners face the fact that they simply don't have such forces. They don't have troops available to form a contingent. Why is that? Because let's imagine that 25,000 people are allocated to be deployed to the territory of Ukraine. So they're deployed, they're stationed here, but you need rotation. You need rotation. That means another 25,000 people must be ready at any moment to replace the initial contingent. So you already need at least 50,000 available troops. At that time, when this possibility was being discussed, Europe simply did not have such forces available. And essentially, that's why it didn't lead to anything. In my opinion, that's exactly what Valery Zaluzhnyi means.
All right, Denis, then let's talk about what Ukraine will be receiving in the near future. If we're not talking about contingents, then military aid packages are exactly what we need here and now. The first package, which the Pentagon is approving, includes the Hawk Phase 3 air defense system and its maintenance. The second package will include Bradley IFVs and their repairs. How important are these packages? We're talking about a sum of $322 million so far. Well, the amount, let's put it this way, for the scale of this war is, to put it mildly, not very large. What do you have to say about this?
Well, any aid packages are important. Absolutely any assistance would be helpful to us right now. That's where I'll start my answer to your question. Next, when we talk about Hawk systems, let's not forget that they are medium-range systems. They can be used both to destroy cruise missiles and, in principle, to take down drones as well. Right now, any means for this purpose will be useful. That's it. This system is not suitable for countering ballistic aerial targets, but nevertheless, it can still perform its function. When we talk about the Bradley, we need to understand that this is an infantry fighting vehicle that is currently a workhorse on the ground. The Bradley IFV is held in very high regard by our soldiers, so it will definitely not be superfluous either. Even if we say that drones are currently shaping the way combat operations are conducted, infantry fighting vehicles are still indispensable, especially a vehicle that, let's say, takes such good care of its crew. In other words, the crew's survivability in the event of a hit to the Bradley IFV is very high.
Okay. And finally, I'd like to ask you one more thing. So Xi Jinping says that he will support Russia even more powerfully. By the way, Xi Jinping also recently spoke with the heads of European states in Beijing. And many people say that the key to ending the war actually lies in Beijing, even more so than in the United States. But I don't want to ask you about the political aspect. I want to ask about the military one. Is there any way for China to further strengthen Russia militarily? And if so, how exactly? And do you think they will actually do it?
I want to repeat once again that the key to ending the war lies in the existence of Vladimir Putin. I want to emphasize this once again because
the possibility of Vladimir Putin's existence, the key to that lies more in China. That's an aspect to consider.
Maybe, yes. Like the death of Koshchei, but that's something that can be debated. Let me emphasize once again that this is Putin's war, and right now he cannot afford to end it in any way that would be perceived as anything other than his victory. Because if it is perceived differently, then his political and physical existence will be, very limited in time. Right now, he is essentially fighting for his existence, both politically and physically. There is, unfortunately, no limit to perfection. The current increase in the number of Shaheeds and the production of Shaheeds that we are witnessing, Russia owes all of this entirely to China. China supplied the machines, China supplied dual-use goods, China supplied the equipment, right? So unfortunately, we are seeing a very sad result. A multiple increase in the number of Shaheeds, the production of Shaheeds, which are flying over our cities and coming down on our heads. And this is just one aspect, but they are also an even greater increase in production, the transfer of even more components. Ultimately, there still remains the option of directly transferring military equipment as North Korea does for the Russian Federation. If China starts supplying military equipment in large quantities, the situation could change dramatically.
Well, yes, considering that China could also supply North Korea supposedly through its proxies to Russia, these schemes really probably have no bottom, no limit. Thank you very much. Denis Popovych, military analyst, was on the air of Ukraine Today. All the best to you. Goodbye.